What happens when a prince thinks he can bully one of America's most respected journalists on live television? In just 33 seconds, Prince Harry went from royal guest to absolute meltdown, creating the most shocking moment in CNN history that had viewers glued to their screens last night. This is the exclusive inside story of how Anderson Cooper stood his ground against an entitled royal who thought he could control the narrative, and why millions of people are calling Cooper a hero today. It all started so normally. The CNN studio was buzzing with excitement. Prince Harry had agreed to a rare primetime interview with Anderson Cooper. The cameras were rolling, the lights were perfect, and millions of viewers had tuned in, expecting the usual polite royal chat. But Anderson Cooper had other plans. He wasn't going to give Harry the easy ride that so many other journalists had given him before. Cooper had done his homework, and he had some tough questions ready. The interview began smoothly enough. Harry walked onto the set looking confident, maybe even a little too confident. He shook hands with Cooper and settled into his chair with that familiar royal smile. "Your Royal Highness, thank you for joining us tonight," Cooper said in his calm, professional voice. "Please, just call me Harry," the prince replied, flashing that practiced charm. Cooper nodded politely. "All right, Harry, I want to start with something that's been on a lot of people's minds. You've made some very serious accusations about your family in recent interviews. Some people are saying you're being unfair to them." That's when Harry's demeanor started to shift. His smile got a little tighter. "Anderson, I think that's a very loaded question. I've only spoken my truth. But is your truth the whole truth?" Cooper pressed gently. "Your brother William has remained silent about your claims. Don't you think that says something?" Harry's jaw clenched. You could see the irritation building behind his eyes. "My brother has his reasons for staying quiet. That doesn't make my experiences any less valid." Cooper leaned forward slightly. "I'm not questioning the validity of your experiences, Harry. But you've painted some pretty damaging pictures of your family members. Queen Elizabeth, for instance. She can't defend herself anymore." That hit a nerve. Harry's voice got sharper. "I love my grandmother dearly. Everything I've said comes from a place of love and wanting the truth to be known." "But whose version of the truth?" Cooper asked calmly. "You've told your side of many stories, but we rarely hear the other perspectives. Don't you think that's a bit one-sided?" Harry shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Anderson, I came here expecting a respectful conversation, not an interrogation." Cooper remained perfectly composed. "This is a respectful conversation, Harry, but respect doesn't mean avoiding difficult questions. You've made yourself a public figure with very public opinions. The public deserves to hear those opinions challenged." "Challenged?" Harry's voice rose slightly. "Or attacked?" "There's a difference between challenging someone's statements and attacking them personally," Cooper replied smoothly. "I'm simply asking you to consider that there might be other sides to the stories you've told." Harry was getting visibly agitated now. His hands were gripping the armrests of his chair. "You know what, Anderson? I don't think you understand what it's like to grow up in that environment. The pressure, the scrutiny, the complete lack of privacy." Cooper nodded thoughtfully. "You're absolutely right. I don't understand that experience, but I do understand journalism. And I understand that when someone makes public accusations, those accusations should be examined." "Examined or dismissed?" Harry snapped. "Examined," Cooper said firmly, "which is exactly what I'm doing right now." The tension in the studio was getting thick. The camera operators were exchanging glances. This wasn't going the way anyone had expected. Harry took a deep breath, clearly trying to regain his composure. "Look, Anderson, I appreciate what you're trying to do here, but I think you're missing the bigger picture." "Then help me see it," Cooper said. "Help me understand why your perspective is the only one that matters in these situations." That was the moment everything changed. Harry's face flushed red. "The only one that matters? Are you serious right now?" Cooper remained calm as ever. "I'm asking you to help viewers understand why they should believe your version of events without hearing from the other people involved." Harry stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "This is ridiculous. You're twisting my words." "I'm quoting your words," Cooper said, not moving from his position. "Words you said in previous interviews, words you've put in your book, words you've shared with the world." "Out of context," Harry shouted, pointing his finger at Cooper. "You're taking everything out of context." The studio fell silent, except for the quiet hum of the cameras. Cooper looked up at the standing prince with complete composure. "Harry, please sit down. We can discuss the context of any statement you'd like." But Harry was past the point of reasonable discussion. "No, Anderson, I'm done with this ambush. This isn't journalism. This is a hit job." Cooper's voice remained steady and professional. "This is journalism, Harry. This is what happens when public figures make public statements. They get asked public questions. Public questions? Harry laughed bitterly. These aren't questions. They're accusations disguised as questions. They're questions that millions of people want answered, Cooper replied. Questions about consistency, about fairness, about responsibility. Harry began pacing behind his chair like a caged animal. Responsibility? You want to talk about responsibility? Where was the media's responsibility when they were hounding my mother? Where was their responsibility when they were making up stories about my wife? Cooper leaned back in his chair. Those are fair points, Harry. The media has made mistakes, serious ones. But does that give you the right to make accusations without expecting them to be questioned? It gives me the right to tell my story without being attacked for it. Harry shot back. And it gives journalists the right to ask hard questions about that story, Cooper countered calmly. The prince stopped pacing and stared directly into the camera. You know what? This is exactly why we left. This is exactly the kind of treatment we were trying to escape. Cooper turned to face Harry directly. But you didn't escape it, did you? You've continued to engage with the media. Continued to tell your story publicly. You can't have it both ways. That was the final straw. Harry's face went from red to purple. His hands were shaking with rage. You don't get to tell me what I can and can't do, Anderson. You don't get to sit there in your perfect little studio and judge my choices. Cooper's eyebrows raised slightly, but his voice remained perfectly calm. I'm not judging your choices, Harry. I'm asking you to explain them. Explain them? Harry screamed, his voice cracking with emotion. Explain them to who? To you? To some journalist who's never lived a day in my shoes? The camera crew was frozen. Nobody knew whether to keep rolling or cut to commercial, but Cooper gave them a subtle hand signal to keep recording. He knew this was important. Harry, you're getting very upset, Cooper said gently. Maybe we should take a short break. I don't want a break, Harry shouted, slamming his hand down on the desk between them. I want you to stop treating me like I'm some kind of liar. Cooper didn't flinch. I haven't called you a liar, Harry. I've asked you questions. That's what interviews are. These aren't questions. Harry was full on screaming now, spittle flying from his mouth. These are attacks. You're trying to make me look bad on purpose. I'm trying to do my job, Cooper said firmly, and my job is to ask the questions that viewers want answered. Harry began pacing again, running his hands through his hair frantically. Your job? Your job is to destroy people? Your job is to embarrass guests on national television? Cooper stood up slowly, his tall frame towering over the agitated prince. My job is to hold public figures accountable for their public statements. If that makes you uncomfortable, maybe you should reconsider making those statements. Accountable? Harry whirled around to face Cooper. I'll tell you what accountability looks like, Anderson. Accountability looks like admitting that the media destroyed my mother's life. Accountability looks like acknowledging that you people have been trying to destroy mine, too. Cooper's voice got slightly firmer. Harry, I understand you're emotional about this topic, but you're making some very serious accusations about me personally and about this network. Good, Harry yelled. Maybe it's time someone called you out for what you really are. The studio was dead silent, except for Harry's heavy breathing. Cooper looked directly at him with those piercing blue eyes. And what am I, Harry? Harry pointed his finger directly at Cooper's chest. You're a vulture. You're all vultures, feeding off other people's pain and calling it journalism. Cooper took a step back, not out of fear, but out of professionalism. That's enough, Harry. No, it's not enough. Harry was completely unhinged now. I'm tired of people like you thinking you can just tear apart anyone you want and hide behind the excuse of journalism. Cooper looked directly into camera 2. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for what you're witnessing. This was supposed to be a civilized conversation. Don't you dare apologize for me, Harry screamed. Don't you dare act like you're the victim here. Cooper turned back to Harry with steel in his voice. I'm not acting like anything, Harry. I'm trying to conduct a professional interview, and you're having a public meltdown. A meltdown? Harry's voice went up an octave. You want to see a meltdown? I'll show you a meltdown. He grabbed his water glass from the table and threw it against the studio wall. The glass shattered with a loud crash, water dripping down the CNN backdrop. Cooper immediately pressed a button on his desk. Security to Studio 7, please. You're calling security on me? Harry couldn't believe it. You ambush me with gotcha questions and then call security when I defend myself? I'm calling security because you just threw a glass against the wall and you're clearly out of control, Cooper said firmly. Harry was breathing like a wild animal. Out of control? I'm the only one here telling the truth. The truth is that you came on this show expecting softball questions, and when you didn't get them, you threw a tantrum, Cooper said bluntly. A tantrum? Harry was incredulous. This isn't a tantrum, Anderson. This is me finally standing up to people like you. Two security guards appeared at the studio entrance. Cooper nodded to them. Gentlemen, please escort our guest out of the building. Harry looked at the approaching security guards with absolute shock. You're kicking me out? You're actually kicking me out? You threw a glass, Harry. You're screaming and making accusations. Yes, I'm asking you to leave. The security guards approached slowly, their hands visible and non-threatening. Sir, we need you to come with us, one of them said politely. Harry looked around the studio like a trapped animal. This is unbelievable. This is absolutely unbelievable. Cooper sat back down in his chair and straightened his tie. What's unbelievable is that a grown man can't handle basic interview questions without having a complete breakdown. Basic questions? Harry screamed as the security guards gently took his arms. You call that ambush journalism, basic questions? I call holding you accountable for your own words basic journalism, Cooper replied calmly. As the security guards began to escort Harry toward the exit, he turned back one last time. This isn't over, Anderson. The world is going to hear about this. Cooper looked directly at camera one. The world is hearing about it right now, Harry. They're watching you get escorted out of a television studio because you couldn't handle being asked to back up your own statements. Harry tried to break free from the security guards one more time. You set me up. This whole thing was a setup. The only thing I set up was an interview, Cooper said. You're the one who chose to throw things and scream like a child. The security guards were almost at the door now, but Harry kept shouting over his shoulder. You're going to pay for this, Anderson? CNN is going to pay for this. Cooper shook his head sadly. The only person paying for anything here is you, Harry. You just showed millions of people exactly who you really are. And with that, Prince Harry was escorted out of the CNN building, his shouts echoing down the hallway until the studio doors finally closed. Cooper turned to face the camera directly. His composure was perfect, his voice steady. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a short commercial break. When we return, we'll discuss what just happened here tonight and what it means for public discourse in America. The camera held on Cooper's face for a few more seconds, showing a man who had just handled one of the most challenging interviews of his career with complete professionalism. As the studio lights dimmed and they cut to commercial, you could hear Cooper quietly telling his producers, "Make sure we have all of that footage. The American people need to see exactly what just happened here." The most explosive interview in CNN history was over, but the conversation it started was just beginning.